Hello, everybody. I guess you wonder what show this is. This is the day of the show about lemurs.
Okay, Cozy. This is not the show about lemurs. This is a show about patriarchy. This is chapter 3, part 2 about socialization and gender socialization, where we're going to address the question about how patriarchy persists. And so this is a question about why is it all as it is? Why is it all as it is? Why are we still dealing with this gender dynamic in 2020? So what we're talking about is the notion of the binary, and the binary turned on its side in the form of patriarchy. And so we want to address a couple of theories about why this persists, or explanations, and there are more, but I want to tackle the big four. The first explanation for why this is as it is socialization, what we've been talking about, that we are socialized from birth to understand the binary, the notion of opposite sexes, and of patriarchy, male power. That it's just been like this as forever, that all societies have had this since the beginning of time. Cave people were just sort of brainwashed, which is another word for socialization, to accept this notion that it is the natural order of things. We get it through all 5 of our socialization agents. We get it, how we raise our kids, even though we don't raise our kids in a bubble. I'm having a hard time talking today. Our house is a Barbie-free zone. We don't have any Barbies in our house. Our whole neighborhood is a Barbie-free zone. But we do have the Frida Kahlo doll, which Cozy has dressed in the Elsa gown, which is kind of, I don't know if that's hot or that's just weird. That's Frida Kahlo in Elsa's Frozen gown. But we really try to balance out those messages. But you don't raise your kid in a vacuum. We get a message through. We get a message through our peers, and through religion and school, and the media, of course, including a lot of politicians who in 2020 still devalue the female. It's not uncommon, including discussions about sexual abuse cases and sexual harassment, on and on and on. So the message here is that socialization gives us that binary and devalues females. And I want to give you an example of some research that was done in the 1980s by a sociologist named Carol Gilligan, who studied sort of teenage and tween-age girls. And what she found was kind of interesting, that she wrote this amazing book called In a Different Voice that came out in 1983, In a Different Voice, great book, and that she found that boys and girls kind of in the public setting, meaning in schools and churches, are treated roughly equally, right? You're supposed to be good in school. You're playing the same sports in school, playing kickball and stuff like that. Then around age 13, something happens. That girls get hit upside the head with a message that you're not supposed to compete with boys on their turf. You're not supposed to be as smart as they are. So take off your glasses and play dumb, because, one of the things I heard when I was a kid is boys don't make passes at girls who wear glasses. So that, you want to not be smart and challenging them. So you got to take off your glasses and play dumb. And you want to sort of hang back instead of trying to be so ambitious. This is what you want to be, and focus on one thing and one thing only, and that's attracting boys. That you need to focus on your looks and being pleasing to boys. Instead of going out for the team, go out for the cheerleaders where you can root for the boys. Start working on your looks, because maybe you're too fat or too thin, or your hair's not right, or everything needs to be focused on attracting boys. That is now the singular evaluation for girls at this age. This is sort of middle school age. And what she found in doing that research is that girls at this point experience a dramatic drop in self-esteem. That they can't be anything they want to be in the world. They have to be Mrs. to somebody who wants to do anything they want. Right? They have to find a husband, or they have to find a man, or all has to be focused on, getting Prince Charming. And that's the goal. And that these girls experiencing this sort of crushing blow to their ego, because now the world isn't their oyster. They have to just attract a boy. And if a boy doesn't like them, and I think about how cruel we were in, 6th and 7th grade to girls who didn't fit that, beauty standard. It was, we just reinforced that same thing. So no wonder the girls have a self-esteem blow. So the socialization hits these young girls with a message. And I think 13, this was 1983 when this book came out. I think it probably is earlier than that now in the 21st century. And so that's a reflection of socialization and how we learn to devalue women, and their one role is finding a man. That's how they're going to be defined, by the man they can attach themselves to. So you look for, a husband right out of the gate. So there's all that romance. I mean, think about teeny bopper magazines. It's all sort of a rehearsal for, I'm going to marry Harry Styles, or I'm going to marry Justin Bieber, or I'm going to marry whoever the K-pop band at the moment you're supposed to marry, right? That is sort of the focus of getting the guy to love you. And so that's, one example of how socialization reinforces patriarchy, those messages that are sent out to young girls. We're going to try to counter that as much as possible in our house. The second one is the notion of male bonding, that we get sort of different messages for boys and girls about bonding, that boys are supposed to bond. They're supposed, even though they're competing, on the soccer field or the basketball court, ultimately they're sticking together. They're sticking together to reinforce the status quo. This is a classic conflict paradigm here. They're sticking together to reinforce the status quo, to not have their authority challenged, where girls and women are socialized to compete with each other. So you may have heard the phrase divide and conquer. The best way you maintain rule is to have the people below you fighting with each other instead of attacking you. I mean, Marx talked about this all the time. The way you prevent a communist revolution is just have the workers fighting amongst each other, Catholics and Protestants and white and black, and they'll leave the bourgeoisie alone. The same is true for patriarchy. If you have women fighting with each other, I hate her and her skinny thighs. They're all competing for the same Prince Charming, where the guys are all bonded together, where it's on the basketball court or the frat house or the corporate boardroom. There is this male bonding, and I'll sum it up in a phrase you may have heard: bros before hoes. Bros before hoes. The guys will say that yeah, we'll compete, but ultimately we have to interlock our authority to make sure it is not challenged by women. I'll give you a really good example of how this happens in pop culture. Have you seen the TV show The Bachelor? The Bachelor, of which I only watch for sociological and feminist reasons. The idea of The Bachelor is you have this one dude, and he's never like that great or rich or anything. He's just a guy, and sometimes he has abs or something. And all these women have to compete with each other for the one that gets to marry him at the end. I mean, it's so classic, the notion of women competing to get the one guy. And the show is hugely popular because it reinforces that notion that women are catty, and we love to see them go psycho on each other while the guy is just sort of dating all these women at the same time. Now, there is a flip of that show called The Bachelorette, where there's a bunch of guys competing for the hand of a fair young maiden. That show has such lower ratings than The Bachelor. The Bachelorette is like here, and The Bachelor is up here. And it's not as interesting because you see the guys, I've watched it a few times, and the guys are like, why? She's not that great. Why are we fighting each other? And they end up, kind of becoming these bros because that's the thing that reinforces status quo. So male bonding is a really good example of something that we learn that reinforces patriarchal power. The third one is what we call the beauty myth. The beauty myth. A book was written by Naomi Wolf in 1991 that was revolutionary. It was a real important book that I've assigned to my students. It's called The Beauty Myth. And what this book did is look at how images of beauty in our culture are used against women. Because as we said, part of socialization is we learn that women are to be looked at, and when they start to leave that socially constructed image of what's beautiful, which happens to be fairly young, right? We want women to always look young and pretty. They lose their value in society and start to move into spinster territory. And there is this industry that bombards women with the singular message is you are what you look like. You're only going to make it so far in the world if you look this way. And there's some real things there that are at work against women, like life, time, aging. Over the age of 30, women start to lose their looks. I mean, some people would argue that women gain their looks. There are some tribal cultures that find women more attractive the older they are because they have more wisdom. Imagine that. But think of all the women in Congress, all of whom are probably close or not, or close to having gray hair if they don't already have gray hair. I mean, how old is Nancy Pelosi? 900. How old, Hillary Clinton, I'm sure, has gray hair. You would never know it. All these women have to dye their hair to look young, where the men, can rock the gray hair and nobody questions their authority. So this notion of women aging, think of all the plastic surgery that can be done to fight the aging, the Botox and the facelifts and all the things that women are expected to do so they will look a little bit young, where men age gracefully. And also, body size, right? We have a very narrow picture of what female beauty is, so you can be too fat or too thin very easily in our society. And, women are expected to starve themselves. And what she looked at in this book is not just plastic surgery, but eating disorders, the incredible explosion of eating disorders that have happened, where women, especially young women, will starve themselves to death in some cases to fit the standard of beauty, because it is a very narrow image of beauty. There was a really interesting study in the 1990s. There was a show that was really popular in the 1990s called Baywatch. Does anybody know Baywatch anymore? Pamela Anderson. A lot of beach beauties running down the beach in slow motion, saving people. Became a huge international sensation, including in the Pacific Islands, the South Pacific Islands. And in one country, Fiji, where the standard of beauty was larger, that women, larger women were seen as being beautiful. Once this show was beamed into the island of Fiji, all of a sudden, all these, Fiji females were sticking their finger down their throats and starving themselves so they could look more like the women in Baywatch. And some of them were having heart attacks while it was happening. And so there is this really, really powerful image, and she uses the term beauty pornography. And what she talks about in the notion of beauty pornography, it's not the images in Playboy that are hurting women, sort of traditional pornography. It's the images in fashion magazines, because those images are all airbrushed. Those people don't look like that. Your favorite supermodel does not look like that. They're airbrushed and they're digitally altered, and so what she argues in the beauty myth is that women have to focus on their looks. They can't focus on the vote. They can't focus on economic empowerment. They can't focus on labor union activism. They can't focus on the things that we need to move towards equality. They got to focus on their looks. That is the one thing that they will be judged by in this patriarchal society. So that takes their mind off of challenging the status quo. So this is the image I got. And I had a really good chance to meet Naomi Wolf. It was a big thrill because a lot of her books are quite powerful. She has a book all about the vagina, which is I've assigned that book as well, which is really fun to have like dudes walking to class carrying a book about the vagina. So I got to talk to her one time, and I said, look, I've been, assigning your book and talking about the beauty myth for years, and here's the scenario that I use to sort of sum up what your book is about, and tell me if this rings true. And I said, here we go. There is a woman who is, say, a 30-year-old woman in the work world, 30-year unmarried woman. Could be any race, but let's just use a white woman for this standard, because one of the things that she argues is that this has increasingly impacted women who are not white and younger women, and then we've started to see how it's impacted men as well, because there's a huge industry, the gym and the plastic surgery and the dieting industry, and there's a lot of people who profit off this notion that there's a very narrow frame or social construction of beauty. So here's the scenario. 30-year-old, let's say a 30-year-old white woman, actually she could be any race, professional, has a job, unmarried, and finally gets a big promotion. She gets a big promotion in her job. It's been a hard effort, because we know that men get promoted faster than women. We call it the glass ceiling, that women, have to overcome these ideas of, well, she might have a baby, so why am I going to hire her to a higher position, because then she's going to have a baby and leave. So women have all these sort of things working against them. So she finally gets this promotion, age 30, and wants to celebrate. And, her friends are all busy. It's a weeknight. And so she says, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the grocery store, and I'm going to buy some ice cream. I'm going to buy my favorite Ben & Jerry's. I'm going to sit in front of Netflix and just chill and kind of pat myself on the back for finally getting this promotion. So she's at the Fred Meyer. She's got her favorite quart of Chunky Monkey. It's all she's buying. She's in the checkout lane at the grocery store. And there in the checkout lane, she sees a couple things, a couple images. One is a magazine, like Cosmopolitan magazine. And on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine is a beautiful supermodel movie star who is just flawless in quotes, who's, has got the cleavage and got the narrow waist and is just, perfect. And, articles are like how to get a husband by 28 and things like that. Here she is at 30. She's looking at this perfect woman. Then the next thing she sees is a National Enquirer magazine, which is owned by a big Trump supporter, by the way, and it has who has scandal and always has like who's got the best beach body and who's got the worst beach body. And usually there's a picture of a woman's butt. Whose butt is this on the beach? And it's got cellulite, and we're supposed to be repulsed by it, and you open it up to find out who this disgusting human is that would dare go out to show her cellulite-covered ass off in public. And usually because of who owns the magazine, it's usually Hillary Clinton. And then next to that is a little diet book. So here's this woman just, trying to celebrate this achievement, gonna go home and just gouge on some chunky monkey in front of TV, probably watching The Bachelor, and perfect woman with magazines about how to get a husband by 28. Remember, she's 30. Pictures of disgusting woman on the beach with a very natural body. I mean, the Victorians would call that the silken layer, which we call disgusting cellulite, which must be purged at all cost, and a diet book. So, in my scenario, what does this woman do? She's experiencing the beauty myth. So she might just say, I'm going to put this ice cream away. I'm going to buy the diet book and get the hell out of here and head to the gym. And so, that idea, that is something that women work on, is sort of an important way of thinking about the beauty myth, that they're always being barred throughout the course of their lives. It never ends, right? As you get older, especially, it gets more, if you're 20 years old, enjoy it while you got it, but you probably, have some flaws that you could work on. You don't have any flaws. You're perfect. But you get messages that you have flaws, that something's too big or too small or too tall or too wide. It's like, this is perfect, right? And the rest of us are like, you are perfect. So the beauty myth is just really, really insidious, and it's getting better. We're getting better. We're getting images of older women who are rocking the gray hair and larger plus-size models, which a plus-size model is like almost an average-size woman, but she's plus-size. So the beauty myth had a huge impact, but it's still pretty powerful. I mean, I'm happy to say that Playboy magazine is now kind of a thing of the past, and I don't even know if they make Maxim and all those magazines where men ogle at women's bodies, but they've got all the internet porn they can handle, so it's still out there. And it's certainly young girls. I mean, one of the things that happened when the beauty myth came out is they found that younger and younger girls were starving themselves, and anorexia was hitting 11 and 12-year-old girls, which is, as a parent of a girl, scares the death out of me, that she would ever think that she had to starve herself or have bulimia to fit some way of being appreciated by the males in the world. It's just horrific to think about. Okay, the fourth one, and I should have said at the beginning of this lecture, there should be some trigger warnings on some of these topics that we talk about, that some of these things are going to be challenging and be hard to hear for some people. And so we have to talk about the concept of rape culture. And I know as a male, I often don't see it. But I do know the statistics, and sometimes the statistics themselves are triggering, that roughly 1 in 4 women will experience a sexual assault in their lifetime. So if you're not a female, think about, the 4 women that you care about, one of those people will. And if they haven't, they probably likely will. But also the lifelong trauma that goes along with this. And I have to be really mindful of this. I was teaching my criminology class at the University of Oregon, and I was giving a lecture about, how rape is committed mostly by people who are known to the victim. Only 22% of rapes are by strangers. That means 78% are known, who are family members and boyfriends and ex-husbands and on neighbors. And I'm just trying to break through the stereotype of the rapist as the stranger. Most rapes are intra-racial, white on white, for example, and committed by people who are known to the victim. And this young woman in the front row burst into tears, got up, walked out of the classroom, and never came back. I re-traumatized her by talking about this. So I'm very mindful now when I talk about these things that they may bring back some memories, likely based on the number of people in this class. There are likely some people who have experienced some pretty ugly things. So many of the women in my life have stories to tell about rape that happened at early ages, right? I mean, the data shows that this isn't about women who are in their 30s. This is about women who are 12 and 9. So I want to be mindful of that about when we talk about rape culture. So part of talking about rape culture, when we say rape culture, what we mean is the normality of sexual violence against women. So we can talk about the statistics, 1 in 4 women, and every woman knows that if it hasn't happened to her, it could happen to her very likely, and if it has happened to her, it could happen to her again very likely. Right? This is something that all women understand. And there is a friend of mine, Jackson Katz, who does an amazing little experiment in his class when he wants to talk about sexual violence. And this is always mind-blowing. Every time I think about this and doing it in my class, and if we were on campus, I would do this too. He goes up to the chalkboard and draws a line down the middle and writes male on one side of the chalkboard and female on the other. And then he turns around to the class and says, class, I've got a question that I'm going to ask you, and I need your help answering it. I'm going to ask one side of the class and the other side of the class. I'm going to ask the males first, and I'm going to ask the females first. And I need to know, what, this is a very personal question, but I need to know the answer to this question. The question is, what do you do on a regular basis not to get raped? What do you do on a regular basis not to become the victim of sexual violence? And then he says, okay, let me start with the fellas. Guys, what do you do not to get raped? And of course, it's silence. Like, the guys don't say anything. And then somebody will say, don't go to prison. And everybody laughs because, prison rape is so hilarious. And you're like, okay. And he writes it up on the board. Don't go to prison. What else? Nothing. Okay, now I'm going to ask the females, what do you do on a regular basis not to get raped? Hands start to go up. I carry mace. I park my car in the light. I make sure that I don't jog at night. I jog during the day. If I'm at a bar, I always make sure that my drink is covered if I'm not near it, so nobody roofies me. If I'm meeting somebody I don't know, I call my friends as a backup just to make sure the guy isn't a creep. I have a dog. I walk with my keys in my hands. I don't. As soon as I get in the car, I lock the door before I even start it up. And, he's writing furiously all the stuff on the other side of the board, right? And at the end of that, the female side of the board is completely full. The male side of the board just says, don't go to jail. Don't go to prison. The female side's got everything, carry a rape whistle, on and on and on. And the impact of that little experiment is not on the women, because the women all understand that threat is there. And again, I apologize if I am re-traumatizing anyone with this conversation, but women know that threat is always there, including from people that you trust. All right, including from people who are your bosses and people who are your senators and people who are your presidents. The men don't even think about it. The impact of this isn't on the females, it's on the men. Like, holy shit, what? All this stuff that I don't have to think about as a male. Right? That's called privilege. That's called male privilege. But that also reinforces the normality of how common rape is in our culture. Think about how much of the media that we have has rape in it. Let's take a moment to talk about Game of Thrones, shall we? Great show, right? Dragons and great show. King's Landing and all that. I watched the first season of it. A Lannister always pays their debts. And my wife came in and said, what is this show? I'm like, oh, it's really amazing. It's Game of Thrones, and it's like, this ancient world. And she was watching, and she's like, there's rape in this. I'm like, I know, yeah, there's a lot of rapes in it. And she's like, are you okay with that? And I said, well, I hadn't really thought about it. And she's like, when I watch that, I think about that happening to me. I think about what could have happened to me, maybe what did happen to me, what might happen to our daughter. And you're going to watch this as entertainment? You're going to watch Game of Thrones as entertainment where, every other episode there's a rape? And I was like, yeah, I didn't kind of, as a male, just sort of like, oh, this is another rape. It's entertaining. It's a great show. There's dragons in it. Yeah. I stopped watching it. I stopped watching Game of Thrones at that point. She's like, you can either support me and the challenge I have in protecting myself against people who want to rape me, or you can watch a TV show that sees rape as entertaining. You make the choice. And I made the choice. I haven't watched Game of Thrones since. I'm like, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it just shows you how normalized rape is in our culture. There was a film professor who in his class did a really interesting experiment. He edited a bunch of rape scenes from films, and God knows there's tons of rape scenes in movies, whether you're talking about Clockwork Orange or whatever. You don't have to go very far to accumulate 100 scenes of women being raped in movies. But there is a famous movie where a man is raped. It's called Deliverance. It's an amazing John Voight, Burt Reynolds movie from the 70s, Ned Beatty, about these guys hunting in the North Georgia mountains, right up near where I lived. And there's a scene where Ned Beatty is raped by these hillbilly guys. Squeal like a pig, you got a real pretty mouth. If you've ever heard that, that's from Deliverance. And he edited that scene into this montage of all these women being raped. And of course he's showing it, and this is traumatizing. I don't think you could get away with this now. And all the women are like, oh God, oh God, thank you. And the guys are like, seen that movie, seen that movie, seen that movie. And then they show the scene from Deliverance where Ned Beatty is being raped, and they're like, oh, how could you do that? How could you show... And he was like, well, you seem to be fine with all the women being raped in all these movies that you've enjoyed, and there's a scene of a man being raped and you get all triggered. Yeah, and the women were like, yeah, what's up with that? Because we have so normalized in a rape culture the violence against women that we don't even register it. And so what this does to reinforce patriarchy is, first of all, it puts women on the back foot. It means women are always in a defensive position. Women got to figure out where they're going to park their car, where they're going to, make sure their mace is working, and make sure that they don't get roofied at a bar. Women are always in a defensive position, and something that men, because of their male privilege, because of not being raped, don't have to worry about. A story comes on the news. It's going to remind a woman that she's going to be a victim of rape. A lecture about rape is going to remind women about rape. And in a way, this topic is reinforcing patriarchy, because it's reminding a lot of women, oh shit, I got to be careful out there. These guys, maybe the guys that I trust. And I'm doing this because I'm trying to because I understand that women understand this problem, this issue, this rape culture that we're in. I'm trying to talk to the men in the class, the people who define themselves as male, and say, stop thinking, oh, women should do things to defend themselves against rapists. Let's teach, young girls how to do karate and carry mace and all those things. And let's start teaching our fellow males to not rape. Just don't do it. Don't do it. No means no. Consent matters. That woman's body is not your property. Like, those messages we don't get as men in our socialization, that all women are there for us. Right? That's the message that we get. They're all there for us. All you got to do is have enough money or enough game or enough roofies or enough whatever, and she can be yours. I was at a country music fest outside of Corvallis, and there was I know, that might shock you. And there was a dude there with a t-shirt that said, let's play a game, and had sort of a woman kind of like this on the t-shirt. Let's play a game. How many drinks will it take till you let me fuck you? That was the dude's t-shirt. And I just went up to him and I was like, dude, nice rape shirt. And he's like, no, man, I got a girlfriend. And his girlfriend was like, ah. I'm like, no, you're talking about getting women drunk so they'll have sex with you. That's called rape. And he was like, I was apparently the only person, especially male person, this whole frickin' country music fest, Weimar country music fest, that said, this guy's shirt is like, he's a rapist. Let's call this dude out. So the rape culture is something we got to deal with, and it's not women that got to deal with it; it's men that's got to deal with it. So the end piece of this is to start going back to what we're really sort of talking about now, is how all this patriarchy stuff obviously disadvantages women, obviously sexually victimizes girls and women, and forces them to stick fingers down their throats and compete with each other, and all this sort of stuff that it reinforces patriarchy. But it also hurts men, because we're in a box too, right? We're not allowed to eat quiche. We're not allowed to whatever, because we're supposed to play this role of masculinity, and the women that we care about are dying because of it. So when we talk about how we challenge patriarchy, yeah, women can get together and put on pink pussy hats and march in the streets. That's certainly part of it, the feminist movement. But the real way that it changes is the guys on the top who have the privilege of patriarchal power saying, this is bullshit. I really don't benefit from this if all the women that I care about are being hurt and I'm squeezed into this little macho box that I'm supposed to be in. I want to cry. I want to eat quiche. I want to make sure that my daughters and sisters and wives and everybody are safe from sexual violence. That's all it takes. And then we take that thing that is patriarchy and we start turning it on its side to the partnership society that Eisler talks about. And then we can deal with the binary and realize that we actually have a lot more in common than we have different. And that's Randy's little lecture about patriarchy and how socialization reinforces it. So we got 4 things: socialization, male bonding, the beauty myth, and rape culture would make a really good final exam question, but also really important for life. For life. Okay, I'm done. Peace. Love your sisters, love your brothers, love your gender non-conforming people. Female power! Go ahead, sisters! Yay! Don't cry for me, Argentina! Okay, peace out.